Welcome back to Lena's Romantasy collection, where the alphas rule the pack, but the heroines run the show. Quick question before we jump into the drama. Where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments and drop a wolf emoji if you love a jealous, possessive mate. Today we have a wild one. It features high tension, a slow burn, and an alpha pushed right to the edge. But before we start, if you want to support the channel and get early access to stories like this, hit that join button down below. It helps keep the lights on and the romance flowing. Now take a deep breath. The alpha is waiting. Let's read. Chapter 1. The warehouse floor resembled a slaughterhouse. Anita Parker gripped her yellow scrub brush and dug the harsh plastic bristles into the cold concrete. A thick red puddle stretched across the room, soaking into the deep cracks and crevices. She pushed her weight into her shoulders, scrubbing the grime. The stain fought back, clinging to the porous surface. "I am never going to clear my crushing debt," she whispered to the empty, echoing room. "They leave a giant mess and expect me to clean it for pocket change." She shoved her messy brown braid out of her eyes. A light dusting of freckles covered her nose, offering a stark contrast to her pale, tired face. She wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. She took extra care not to stain her faded blue work coveralls. Her dented silver 2008 Chevy hatchback sat parked outside in the dark alley, waiting to take her home to a cold, cramped apartment. She dunked the yellow brush into her red plastic bucket. The pungent smell of industrial bleach burned her nose. She poured a splash of the liquid from a heavy jug onto the worst of the stains. The chemicals hissed and bubbled against the organic matter. She attacked the spot again. Her arms burned with the effort. Every muscle ached. She needed this paycheck. The landlord threatened eviction just yesterday. A loud clatter broke the silence. The metal side door banged open, hitting the brick wall with a harsh clang. Anita froze. She kept her grip tight on the brush handle. A small shape trotted into the warehouse. A sweet beagle with long, floppy ears padded across the concrete. The dog sniffed the wet floor, avoided the soapy puddle with a nimble hop, and let out a soft, happy bark. "Hey, get out of that," Anita whispered. She waved her brush at the dog. "You are ruining my clean floor." The beagle ignored her warning. She trotted over, sniffed Anita's heavy work boots, and wagged her tail. The dog nudged her wet nose against Anita's knee. Heavy footsteps echoed from the open doorway. A man stepped into the dim light. The air in the room shifted. A scent rolled over the chemical bleach, crushed pine needles, and rain. It hit Anita like a punch to the gut. The fragrance carried a strange weight, making her lungs tighten. The man stood tall and lean. Not an ounce of fat rested on his frame. He wore a tailored, jet-black suit that hugged his broad shoulders. Raven black hair fell across his forehead in a messy sweep. A sharp, rigid jawline framed his face. On his right hand, a thick, solid gold signet ring caught the flickering overhead light. He cracked his knuckles one by one. The sharp, popping sound echoed off the metal walls, sounding like breaking twigs. "Minx, here," the man said. His voice rumbled low and smooth. It carried a strange, heavy command that made Anita's knees want to buckle. The beagle barked, spun in a circle, and sat right on top of Anita's clean boots. The man tilted his head. His dark eyes locked onto Anita. He looked at her coveralls, the red plastic bucket, and the yellow brush in her hand. The silence stretched tight. He stepped closer. Heat radiated off his skin like a walking space heater. "You smell like wild blackberry and sweetgrass," he stated. His tone left zero room for arguments. "You belong to me now." Anita blinked. She gripped the plastic handle of the bleach jug resting next to her red bucket. "You must be joking," Anita whispered out loud. She chewed on the inside of her cheek. "I belong to my landlord and he wants his rent money by Friday. Take your dog and leave my crime scene." The man did not blink. "My name is Garrison. You are coming with me." "I'm working," she whispered. "You're done." Garrison took another step forward. His sheer presence felt like a jackhammer against her ribs. Anita panicked. She snatched the heavy bleach jug from the floor. She hurled the plastic bottle straight at his feet. The container smashed against his polished leather boots, burst open. Chemical foam splashed all over his expensive suit pants. Garrison looked down at the ruined fabric. He did not flinch. He just cracked his neck. Anita didn't wait for a reaction. Still gripping her yellow scrub brush in one hand, she snatched her red plastic bucket by the handle with her other hand. She spun on her heel and sprinted for the back exit. Chapter 2. Anita hit the metal exit door and shoved it open with her shoulder. The cool night air slapped her face. She sprinted down the dark, narrow alleyway behind the warehouse. Trash bags and broken wooden pallets blurred past her vision. Her chest heaved. The yellow scrub brush felt slippery in her sweaty right palm. The handle of the red plastic bucket dug into the fingers of her left hand. She held on to both items with a death grip. "This is a nightmare," she whispered between rough breaths. "I just threw bleach on a mafia boss. I'm dead meat." Fast footsteps slapped the pavement behind her. Garrison's guards were already on her trail. They moved too fast for normal men. They cleared the distance with terrifying speed, their boots thudding against the asphalt like a steady drumbeat. Anita pushed her legs harder. Her lungs burned. She reached the end of the alley where it spilled onto a busy city sidewalk. A neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a harsh red light across the pavement. A stranger stood near the brick wall, lighting a cigarette. He wore a scuffed leather jacket and torn jeans. Anita heard the guards round the corner behind her. She had nowhere to hide. She dropped her red bucket onto the sidewalk with a plastic clatter. She grabbed the stranger by the collar of his leather jacket, yanked his chest down, and crashed her mouth against his lips. The kiss was sloppy and desperate. The man tasted like stale tobacco and cheap coffee. He stiffened in shock, his hands flying up to push her away. Anita kept her grip tight on his jacket, leaning her body into him to hide her face from the alley entrance. She kept her yellow brush pressed flat against his spine. The running footsteps stopped. The guards reached the street. The stranger in the leather jacket ripped himself away from Anita. He opened his mouth to shout a curse, but the words died in his throat. His eyes widened in pure terror. He looked past Anita, staring straight into the mouth of the dark alley. The man's knees gave out. He dropped straight to the hard concrete pavement, his head bowed, his hands shaking against the dirt. Anita spun around. Garrison stepped out of the shadows and into the red neon light. The bleach stain ruined the bottom half of his suit pants, but he didn't care. He stood tall, a looming shadow against the brick wall. His chest expanded. The heat rolling off his body warmed the cool night wind. Garrison stared at the kneeling stranger, then shifted his dark gaze to Anita. He bared his teeth. A low, vibrating growl ripped through his chest, sounding more beast than human. "Run!" Garrison roared. The single word hit Anita like a physical blow. The power in his voice cracked like a whip. A ringing ache spiked right through the center of her skull. It felt like a sharp kick to her ribs, forcing the air from her lungs. The stranger on the ground whimpered and pressed his face to the dirty sidewalk, paralyzed by fear. Anita stumbled backward. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her breastbone. She grabbed the handle of her red plastic bucket from the ground. She turned and sprinted down the busy street. She pushed past late-night walkers and dodged overflowing trash cans. The ringing in her head pulsed with every step. She didn't look back. She just kept running, her fingers digging into the hard plastic of her cleaning supplies. The sound of her heavy work boots echoed against the storefront windows. She needed a crowded place to blend in, sometimes bright and loud, where a man in a ruined suit couldn't drag her away in the dark. Chapter 3. Anita dodged an empty taxi and bolted across the four-lane street. Car horns blared, tires screeched against the blacktop. She ignored them all. The ringing in her head faded, but the sheer panic remained. Up ahead, a bright diner sat on the street corner. The wide glass windows glowed with warm yellow light. Anita grabbed the heavy glass door and shoved it open. A silver bell chimed above her head. The smell of frying grease and burnt coffee hit her nose. 3 truck drivers sat at the front counter, hunched over plates of scrambled eggs. A tired waitress wiped down a sticky table in the back section. Anita rushed past the front counter and ducked into the furthest corner booth. She slid across the cracked vinyl seat and pressed her back against the wall, hiding from the street-facing windows. "I'm going to get fired, and then I'm going to die," she whispered to the empty table. She dropped her red plastic bucket onto the floor with a thud. She placed her yellow scrub brush next to the napkin dispenser. Her hands shook. She chewed the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. The waitress walked over and placed a stained ceramic mug on the table. She filled it with black coffee from a glass pot. "Long night, honey?" the waitress asked. "You have no idea," Anita whispered, staring at her dirty hands. The silver bell above the front door chimed again. The diner went dead silent. The truck drivers stopped chewing their food. The waitress froze mid-step, the coffee pot hovering in her hand. Anita peeked over the edge of her booth. Garrison stepped inside. He had to duck his head to clear the doorframe. The bright fluorescent lights hit the gold signet ring on his finger. The heat radiating off him sucked the oxygen right out of the diner. The bleach stains on his pants stood out, yet no one dared to look at them. No one spoke. Nobody moved. The sheer presence of the Alpha paralyzed the room. Garrison scanned the booths. His dark eyes swept over the truck drivers, the waitress, and the empty tables. He looked calm. A predatory stillness settled over his broad shoulders. A small, wet nose poked around his expensive leather boots. Minx trotted into the diner. The beagle sniffed the linoleum floor, her floppy ears bouncing with each step. "Please don't find me," Anita whispered, sinking lower into her vinyl seat. "Please go away." Minx stopped. She turned her head toward the back corner. The dog let out a sharp bark and scrambled past the counter stools. She darted down the aisle, her claws clicking against the tiles. The beagle slid under Anita's table. She popped her head up between Anita's knees, placed her front paws on the red plastic bucket, and let out a series of happy barks. Anita closed her eyes. Her cover was blown. Footsteps approached the booth, deliberate and heavy. Anita looked up. Garrison stood right beside her table. He glanced at the yellow scrub brush sitting next to her coffee mug, then looked down at her. "Time to go," Garrison stated. He reached out and wrapped his large, hot hand around her wrist. Chapter 4. Garrison pulled Anita from the diner booth. His grip felt like iron, hot and unyielding. She dragged her heavy work boots across the floor, but his raw strength outmatched hers by a mile. She snatched her yellow scrub brush from the table with her free hand. She reached down, grabbed the handle of her red plastic bucket, and let him haul her out the front door. A matte navy blue Audi coupe sat idling at the curb. The engine purred with power. Garrison opened the passenger door and shoved her inside. "Sit," he commanded. Anita hit the leather seat. Minx jumped in right after her, scrambling into her lap and licking her hands. Garrison slammed the door shut, trapping her inside the vehicle. He walked around the hood and slid into the driver's seat. "This is kidnapping," Anita whispered out loud, clutching the yellow brush and the red bucket to her chest. Garrison put the car in gear. "This is relocation." He merged the Audi into the late-night traffic. The silence inside the cabin felt thick. Garrison drove with one hand on the steering wheel, the gold signet ring catching the glow of the dashboard lights. The heat radiating from his body warmed the entire car, making Anita sweat under her faded coveralls. She stared out the passenger window, her heart racing a mile a minute. Minx curled into a tight ball on her lap and fell asleep. 10 minutes later, the Audi pulled into an underground parking garage. Garrison parked the car and led her toward a private glass elevator. They rode up to the top floor without exchanging a single word. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a penthouse that screamed wealth. The space featured towering floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glowing city skyline. A black marble fireplace dominated the living room. Sleek, dark furniture sat on top of plush gray rugs. Every inch of the room showcased raw luxury and power. Garrison walked her down a long hallway. He stopped at a solid oak door and pushed it open. "Guest room," Garrison said. "You sleep here." "I sleep in my own apartment," Anita whispered, crossing her arms over her chest, her fingers still wrapped around the plastic bucket handle. "You stay here," he repeated, his voice vibrating with that strange, heavy power. He didn't yell, but the command left no room for debate. He stepped back into the hallway. "Get some rest. We have a lot to talk about tomorrow. He reached for the oak door and pulled it shut. The metal latch clicked into place. Anita stood alone in the dark room. A giant plush bed sat in the center. She stared at the closed door. Panic bubbled in her throat. She refused to be a prisoner in a glass cage. She walked over to the door and tested the brass knob. It turned, but she didn't trust him to leave it unlocked all night. She needed insurance. Anita looked down at the yellow scrub brush in her hand. The hard plastic handle featured a thick loop at the end. She wedged the brush under the metal door handle, shoving it hard against the wood paneling. The bristles dug into the floorboards, creating a tight, unbreakable jam. She set her red plastic bucket on the floor next to the wall. "Try locking me in now," Anita whispered. She backed away from the door, sat on the edge of the mattress, and waited for morning. Chapter 5. Morning sunlight pierced the towering floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest room. Anita Parker sat up on the plush mattress. She rubbed the sleep from her tired eyes. She stared at the heavy oak door. Her yellow scrub brush remained wedged under the brass handle. The hard plastic bristles dug deep into the expensive hardwood floorboards. No one had forced entry during the night. "Small victories," she whispered to the empty room. She swung her legs over the edge of the oversized bed. The sheets felt like spun silk. They provided a sharp contrast to the scratchy wool blankets in her cold apartment. A sharp rap hit the thick wood paneling. "Anita!" Garrison's voice rumbled through the oak. His tone carried that strange, knee-buckling command. "Open the door!" She chewed the inside of her cheek. She walked over, gripped the sturdy plastic handle of her yellow brush, and yanked it free. She twisted the brass knob and pulled the door open. Garrison stood in the hallway. He wore dark denim jeans and a crisp black button-down shirt. The solid gold signet ring glinted on his right hand. Beside his polished leather boots, Minx the sweet beagle wagged her tail. The dog nudged her wet nose against Anita's faded blue coveralls. Garrison held out a familiar silver keychain attached to a frayed blue lanyard. He also held a brand-new, heavy jug of industrial bleach in his other hand. "My car keys," Anita said. She snatched the keychain from his wide palm. "My men towed your Chevy hatchback to the secure underground garage," Garrison stated. He shoved the heavy bleach jug toward her chest. "You broke your last bottle. Take this. We have business to discuss." He turned and walked down the long, shadowed hallway. Anita hesitated. She clutched the new bleach jug against her ribs, holding her yellow scrub brush in her other hand. Minx trotted at her heels with a happy bounce. Anita followed the tall man into a sprawling kitchen. The space featured an expansive island made of polished white marble. High-end stainless steel appliances lined the walls. Garrison stood by the stove, shoveling thick cuts of rare steak and 6 fried eggs onto a porcelain plate. Heat radiated off his skin, warming the entire kitchen. He burned through food at an incredible rate to fuel his tall, lean frame. He set the giant plate on the marble counter, grabbed a thick manila envelope from a drawer, and tossed it toward Anita. It hit the stone surface with a heavy, satisfying thud. "Open it," he commanded. He picked up a fork and devoured a piece of meat. Anita stepped closer. She placed her bleach jug and yellow brush on the counter. She grabbed the paper flap of the envelope and pulled. Bundles of crisp, green $100 bills spilled out. The stack represented pure financial freedom. It held enough power to pay her landlord and leave a cushion for a quiet cabin in the woods. "This is a joke," she whispered. Her hands shook as she touched the paper currency. "It's a down payment," Garrison said. He chewed his food, his dark eyes fixed on her face. "A rival faction left a ruined mess in an abandoned dockside warehouse. I want you to clean it. You do the job, you keep that cash. I hand you double that amount when you finish the task." Anita stared at the money. The temptation gripped her throat. The sheer volume of cash offered an escape from her crushing debt. "Why me?" she asked. "You have dozens of guards who own a mob." "My men fight. You're a professional." He pushed the thick envelope closer to her edge of the marble. "Do we have a deal?" "I'm going to regret this," she whispered to the cold counter. She shoved her messy brown braid over her shoulder. She snatched the envelope and stuffed the thick stack of bills deep into the side pocket of her faded blue coveralls. "Fine, but I drive my own car to the site." Garrison bared his teeth in a sharp grin. "Done." Anita grabbed her new bleach jug and her yellow scrub brush. She walked back to the guest room, picked up her empty red plastic bucket from the floor, and tossed her supplies inside. She headed straight for the glass elevator. The ride down to the underground garage felt tense. When the doors parted, she spotted her dented silver Chevy parked right next to Garrison's matte navy blue Audi coupe. The contrast looked absurd. Her car meant freedom. She unlocked the Chevy door, threw her red bucket onto the passenger seat, and cranked the ignition. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. She gripped the steering wheel, determined to finish this job, take the cash, and vanish forever. Chapter 6. Anita parked her dented silver Chevy outside the rotting dockside warehouse. The air smelled of dead fish and stale sea salt. She grabbed her red plastic bucket from the passenger seat. The heavy jug of bleach and the yellow scrub brush clattered inside the plastic container. She pushed through the heavy metal side door. The interior mirrored a disaster zone. Broken wooden crates littered the cracked concrete floor. Splintered shipping pallets formed jagged mountains of debris against the far brick wall. At the center of the giant room, a dark, sticky stain coated a raised section of wooden floorboards. The mess pooled thick and ugly across the grain. "They really know how to ruin a good floor," Anita whispered to the empty, echoing room. She set her red plastic bucket down with a loud thud. She pulled out the fresh jug of industrial bleach and popped the plastic cap. She splashed the harsh chemicals over the center of the giant stain. The liquid hissed and bubbled against the organic grime. She grabbed her yellow scrub brush, dropped to her knees, and attacked the wood. She scrubbed the floorboards with brutal force. The harsh bristles scraped against the wood, biting into the mess. Her arms ached with the effort. Sweat beaded on her forehead and rolled down her nose. She wiped her face with her canvas sleeve and kept pushing her weight into her shoulders. The grueling work numbed her racing mind. She focused only on the repetitive motion, ignoring the dark shadows lurking in the corners of the cavernous building. She poured more bleach, attacked a stubborn patch of grime, and rinsed the area with a rag she kept in her coverall pocket. Near the edge of the main stain, a wooden floorboard felt loose under her knees. It groaned under her weight, shifting upward and pinching the fabric of her pant leg. Anita paused. She wedged the hard plastic handle of her yellow scrub brush into the narrow gap between the planks. She pushed down hard, using the brush handle as a makeshift lever. The old iron nails squealed against the dry wood. The plank popped loose, revealing a dark, hollow gap beneath the flooring. "What do we have down here?" she whispered. She peered into the shadows. Dust coated the hidden compartment. Resting on top of the dirt sat a long, sharp object catching the dim light. Anita reached into the hole and pulled the item out. It was a solid silver letter opener. The metal felt heavy and cold in her palm. Intricate vines crawled up the handle, leading to a blade sharp enough to slice through a leather belt. It gleamed, pristine and untouched by the grime surrounding it. She remembered Garrison's solid gold signet ring. She remembered the sheer power radiating from his body. The stranger in the alley dropped to his knees in pure, paralyzing terror just hours ago. Garrison and his men were dangerous. The rival faction that left this horrific mess was likely just as lethal. A yellow scrub brush and a red plastic bucket offered zero protection against the monsters running the underground streets. Anita ran her thumb over the flat side of the silver blade. The cold metal gave her a strange, sudden sense of comfort. It functioned as a solid, deadly tool. She glanced around the empty warehouse, making sure no one lurked in the shadows. She pulled up the cuff of her pant leg and unlaced the top of her heavy work boot. She slid the solid silver letter opener inside the footwear. She pressed the cold metal flat against her thick sock, hiding the blade from view. She tied her laces tight, securing the weapon in place. "Better safe than sorry," she whispered. She tested her footing. The blade pressed against her ankle, forming a hidden shield against the chaos of the night. She grabbed the loose floorboard and slammed it back into place. She kicked the rusty nail down with the heavy heel of her boot. She picked up her yellow brush, dropped it back into the red bucket, and returned to her scrubbing. The stain began to lift, revealing the pale wood beneath the carnage. She worked for hours until the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the warehouse into deep, suffocating shadows. Only a single bulb flickered overhead, casting a pale yellow glow over her work area. Chapter 7. The single overhead bulb buzzed. It cast long, distorted shadows across the clean floorboards. Anita sat back on her heels and wiped sweat from her brow. She had scrubbed the final traces of the dark stain away. The sprawling dockside warehouse stood dead silent. It smelled of harsh chemical bleach and stale seawater. A giant crash shattered the quiet night. The rusted metal loading bay door buckled inward. Metal screeched as thick, curved claws tore straight through the heavy, corrugated steel. The door ripped off its iron hinges and slammed onto the concrete floor with a deafening boom. Anita scrambled backward in a panic. She kicked her red plastic bucket over. The heavy bleach jug spilled across the wooden planks she had just scrubbed. She gripped her yellow scrub brush tight in her fist, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. A giant beast stepped through the ruined doorway. It was a living nightmare pulled straight from hell. The creature stood on two thick legs, towering over 8 feet tall. Coarse, matted gray fur covered its hulking, muscular body. Thick white foam dripped from its elongated jaws, revealing row after row of razor-sharp teeth. Its wild yellow eyes locked onto Anita, burning with unhinged malice. "This isn't real," she whispered. Her voice trembled in the empty space. "This isn't happening." The rogue wolf let out a guttural, wet roar that shook the dust from the wooden rafters. It dropped to all fours and charged across the warehouse floor. Its thick claws gouged deep tracks into the solid concrete. Anita froze, her muscles locked in pure, blinding terror. The beast closed the distance in mere seconds. It leaped into the air, its terrible jaws opening wide to snap her fragile neck. A blur of jet black intercepted the monster in midair. Garrison slammed into the side of the rogue wolf like a runaway freight train. The brutal impact sounded like 2 cars colliding head-on. Both heavy figures crashed to the floorboards, splintering the clean wood Anita had just spent hours scrubbing. The rogue wolf thrashed, wild and vicious. It slashed its thick claws toward Garrison's chest. Garrison didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He grabbed the beast by its thick, furry throat with his bare hands. Immense heat radiated from his body, warping the cold air around them. The rogue snapped its jaws, desperate to bite Garrison's thick arm. Garrison bared his teeth, looking just as feral as the beast. He twisted his strong wrists with a brutal, calculated motion. A sharp, sickening crack echoed through the vast warehouse. The giant beast went limp. Its heavy body slumped hard against the ruined floorboards. Garrison released his iron grip. The monster hit the ground and stopped moving. Garrison stood up. His crisp, black, button-down shirt was torn at the shoulder from the sharp claws, but underneath the ripped fabric, his skin remained flawless and unharmed. He rolled his broad shoulders, cracking his neck to relieve the tension. He turned to face Anita. The dim overhead light caught his sharp face. His dark human eyes were gone. Bright, glowing amber rings burned in their place, shining with raw, untamed animalistic power in the darkness. The pupils looked blown wide, black and endless. His broad chest heaved. The heavy scent of crushed pine needles and rain flooded the room, overpowering the harsh bleach. Anita backed away. Her heavy work boots slipped on the spilled bleach puddle. Her back hit the cold brick wall behind her. She clutched her yellow brush to her chest like a useless shield. The solid silver letter opener hidden inside her boot pressed against her ankle, a stark reminder of her grim reality. The envelope of cash sitting in her pocket felt like a cruel anchor. "You're a monster," she whispered. Her breath hitched in her dry throat. Garrison's glowing eyes tracked her every movement. The amber light flared brighter in the shadows. He stepped right over the dead beast, closing the distance between them. The sheer heat rolling off his skin felt suffocating in the enclosed space. "I'm an alpha," Garrison rumbled. His voice vibrated with that heavy, knee-buckling command that shook her bones. "And you are my mate." Chapter 8. Anita stared at the glowing amber eyes burning in the dark shadows of the warehouse. Her mind raced, struggling to process the dead, furry monster bleeding on the floorboards and the terrifying man standing right in front of her. The revelation hit her like a punch to the gut. She squeezed the sturdy plastic handle of her yellow scrub brush until her knuckles turned bone white. "I cleaned the floor," she whispered. Her voice shook, but she pushed through the fear with sheer defiance. "I did the job we agreed on. The cash is in my pocket. Give me the second half of my pay so I can leave this nightmare." Garrison didn't blink. The terrifying amber rings in his eyes faded, dissolving back into his natural dark stare. The sheer, intense heat radiating from his chest still warmed the cold air trapped in the space between them. "You aren't leaving," Garrison stated. His voice carried unbending authority. "We made a deal this morning," Anita shot back, whispering louder this time. "I clean the mess, you give me the rest of the cash, and I drive my Chevy back home to my apartment." "The deal changed the exact second that rogue wolf stepped into this building," Garrison said. He gestured toward the heavy corpse resting on the splintered planks. "This city isn't safe for you anymore. You stay by my side. I protect what belongs to me." "I'm not your property, and I'm not your prisoner," she whispered. Her sassy streak broke straight through the paralyzing panic. "You are my mate," he corrected. His low tone left zero room for human argument. Anita chewed the inside of her cheek hard, tasting copper. Arguing with a man who snapped a giant monster's neck without effort was a losing game. She needed an exit, and she needed it right now. She glanced past his broad shoulders. Behind Garrison, near the far right corner of the expansive warehouse, an old metal fire escape door hung ajar, leading out into the pitch-black alleyway. "Fine," she whispered, lowering her yellow scrub brush to her side. She let her shoulders slump, forcing her body to feign defeat. "Let me just grab my cleaning bucket." Garrison watched her with a hard stare, his posture rigid. He nodded once, stepping aside just enough to let her pass his towering frame. Anita walked toward the spilled bleach puddle. She reached down and grabbed the handle of her red plastic bucket. She tossed the yellow brush inside. The exact second Garrison turned his dark head to inspect the dead rogue wolf's sharp claws, Anita bolted. She sprinted across the cracked concrete, her boots pounding the floor. She hit the metal fire escape door hard with her shoulder. The rusted iron hinges screamed as she shoved her way out onto the grated landing. The night wind whipped her messy brown braid across her face. She clutched her red plastic bucket like a lifeline and scrambled down the rusted metal stairs. Her heavy work boots clanked against the iron steps. The hidden, solid silver letter opener pressed against her ankle with every desperate movement. She descended 3 steep flights, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm. She focused all her energy on reaching the dark alley below so she could make a run for her Chevy hatchback. She hit the final metal landing and jumped the last few steps. Her boots slammed onto the solid concrete pavement. She froze in her tracks. Garrison stood waiting at the bottom of the fire escape, leaning against the cold brick wall. His dark denim jeans and crisp black shirt blended right into the surrounding shadows. He adjusted the solid gold signet ring on his right hand, looking unbothered by her escape attempt. He had not broken a sweat. Beside his polished leather boots, Minx, the sweet beagle, sat on the pavement, wagging her floppy tail. The dog let out a sharp, happy bark, trotting over to sniff Anita's dusty work boots. "How did you get down here so fast?" Anita whispered, staring at the tall man in shock. "I told you the truth upstairs," Garrison rumbled, pushing off the brick wall and stepping into the dim streetlight. The familiar, overwhelming heat of his body washed over her skin once again. "You aren't leaving." Chapter 9. Garrison stood in the dark alley, the streetlights catching the sharp angles of his face. He adjusted the solid gold signet ring on his right hand. Minx, the sweet beagle, sat by his polished leather boots, wagging her floppy tail. Anita gripped the plastic handle of her red bucket, her chest heaving. She had just sprinted down 3 flights of rusted metal stairs, only to find the Alpha waiting for her. "My guards will secure your Chevy hatchback and drive it to the underground garage," Garrison stated. He pointed down the street. His matte navy blue Audi coupe idled by the curb. "Get in." Anita chewed the inside of her cheek. She clutched her red bucket tight against her ribs. The yellow scrub brush rattled inside the plastic container. She marched past him without a word, her heavy work boots stomping against the concrete. She opened the passenger door and slid into the leather seat. Minx jumped in right behind her, curling into a ball on her lap. Garrison took the wheel, steering the powerful car through the late-night city traffic. They rode up the private glass elevator in complete silence. The sheer heat radiating from Garrison's tall, lean frame warmed the enclosed space. The moment the doors parted, he led her down the long hallway of the penthouse. He stopped at the guest room door. "Clean up," he commanded. "A package rests on the bed. Put it on. My pack expects to meet you at dinner in 15 minutes. He turned and walked away. Anita stepped into the room and shut the door. A sleek garment bag lay across the plush mattress. Anita unzipped the black fabric. A stunning midnight blue dress shimmered under the bedroom lights. The material felt like spun silk, soft and light, offering a stark contrast to her rough, dirty work clothes. She stripped off her faded blue coveralls and washed her face in the adjoining bathroom. She pulled the midnight blue dress over her head. The gown fit her frame perfectly, falling to her ankles. She ran her hands down the sides and discovered deep, hidden pockets sewn into the silk seams. She grabbed the thick envelope of cash from her discarded coveralls. She pulled out the thick stack of $100 bills and shoved the money deep into the right pocket of the dress. She looked down at her bare feet. Delicate silver heels sat on the rug. She ignored them. She refused to walk into a room full of monsters without her only defense. She pulled her thick socks back on. She grabbed her heavy work boots. She checked the solid silver letter opener. The cold metal blade remained tucked safely against her ankle. She laced the boots tight. The long, flowing skirt of the midnight blue dress completely hid the clunky, dirt-stained footwear. "I look like an absolute clown," she whispered to the mirror. She grabbed her red plastic bucket from the floor. The yellow scrub brush sat inside. She refused to leave her supplies out of her sight. She marched out of the guest room, gripping the red plastic handle. Garrison waited in the grand foyer. He wore a fresh, untorn, jet-black suit. His raven-black hair fell across his forehead. He stared at the red bucket in her hand, his dark eyes narrowing, but he said nothing. He offered his arm. Anita ignored it, walking past him. They entered a massive dining hall. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting brilliant light across the room. A giant mahogany table stretched from end to end, piled high with roasted meats, fresh bread, and dark wine. Dozens of wolves sat in heavy wooden chairs. The chatter died the exact second Garrison stepped through the archway. The female wolves turned their heads. Their eyes raked over Anita's midnight blue dress, stopping at the red plastic bucket in her hand. They glared at her with pure, unfiltered disgust. Garrison pulled a chair out for Anita at the head of the table. She sat down. Minx trotted under the mahogany table, resting her chin on Anita's heavy work boots. A towering man with jagged scars across his cheeks stood up from his chair. He slammed his heavy fists onto the wooden table. The plates rattled. "A human?" the scarred man spat. His voice echoed through the silent dining hall. "You bring a weak human into our home, Alpha?" Anita chewed her cheek. "I am sitting right here," she whispered to her empty plate. Garrison did not sit. He turned his head toward the scarred man. "Watch your tone, Corbin." Corbin bared his teeth. "She smells of wild blackberry and sweet grass. She is prey. Our enemies gather at the borders, and you parade a fragile maid through our halls. I challenge this insult." Chapter 10. Corbin shoved his heavy wooden chair backward. It scraped harsh and loud against the polished floorboards. He stepped away from the mahogany table, his broad chest expanding. Scars twisted across his cheeks, showing years of brutal, unhealed violence. Garrison unbuttoned his crisp, jet-black suit jacket. He tossed the expensive garment onto the back of his chair. He rolled up the sleeves of his black button-down shirt, exposing thick, muscular forearms. The solid gold signet ring glinted on his right hand. He stepped into the open center of the dining hall, his posture rigid and calm. "You challenge my mate, you challenge me," Garrison rumbled. His voice carried that heavy, vibrating command that made the air feel thick and suffocating. "She is weak," Corbin sneered, rolling his broad shoulders. Anita gripped the plastic handle of her red bucket tight. She pressed her boots against the floor, feeling the solid silver letter opener resting against her ankle. Minx let out a low whine, pressing her furry body against Anita's leg under the table. "This guy is going to get himself killed," Anita whispered, watching the scarred man circle her alpha. Corbin swung first. He launched a brutal, bone-crushing right hook aimed straight at Garrison's jaw. Garrison ducked under the massive fist with terrifying speed. He drove a vicious punch into Corbin's ribs. The sound of flesh hitting flesh cracked like a gunshot through the silent dining room. Corbin grunted, stumbling back a single step. He recovered fast, lunging forward to grapple. He grabbed Garrison by the shoulders, using his sheer mass to drive the alpha backward. They slammed into a towering antique display cabinet. The glass doors shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, raining down on the hardwood floor. Garrison planted his polished leather boots. He grabbed Corbin by the collar of his shirt and threw the massive man across the room. Corbin crashed into a serving table, snapping the wooden legs in half. Silver platters and roasted meats scattered across the floor. The pack watched in dead silence. No one interfered. Corbin scrambled to his feet. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye, but a wild, desperate grin stretched across his face. He realized he could not match Garrison's raw strength. He reached behind his back, slipping his hand under the waistband of his pants. He pulled a jagged steel hunting knife from its hidden sheath. The blade caught the light of the crystal chandeliers. "He has a knife," Anita whispered, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Corbin lunged forward, thrusting the steel blade straight toward Garrison's stomach. Garrison shifted his weight to dodge, but the scarred man anticipated the move, swiping the blade in a wide, lethal arc toward Garrison's throat. Anita did not think. She reacted. She stood up, pulling her arm back. She hurled her red plastic bucket across the dining hall with every ounce of strength she possessed. The bucket flew through the air. The yellow scrub brush tumbled out, clattering across the floorboards. The heavy red plastic container sailed straight into the combat zone. It smashed right into the side of Corbin's face. The hard plastic impact forced Corbin to flinch. He blinked, shaking his head, his swing pausing for a fraction of a second. The red bucket bounced off his skull and hit the ground with a loud clatter. That fraction of a second sealed his fate. Garrison seized the opening. He stepped inside Corbin's guard, grabbed the wrist holding the steel knife, and twisted. A sharp snap echoed through the room. Corbin dropped the weapon, howling in pain. Garrison drove his knee upward, catching the beta flush in the chest. Corbin hit the floor hard. He did not get back up. Garrison stood over the unconscious man. His broad chest heaved. He cracked his knuckles one by one. The sharp popping sound cut through the tense silence. He turned his dark gaze toward the pack. The glowing amber rings flared in his eyes for a brief second before fading back to black. Every single wolf in the dining hall lowered their head, staring at the floorboards in absolute submission. Garrison turned around. He looked at the red plastic bucket resting near Corbin's head. He looked at the yellow scrub brush sitting a few feet away. Finally, his eyes locked onto Anita. He walked toward her. The intense heat radiating from his body washed over her skin. He did not say a word. He leaned down, scooped her up into his strong arms, and lifted her off the floor. "Put me down," she whispered, her hands pressing flat against his firm chest. Garrison ignored her. He carried her out of the dining hall, leaving the shattered glass and the unconscious beta behind. Chapter 11. Garrison carried Anita down the long, shadowed corridor of the penthouse. His raw strength made her feel weightless in his arms. She kicked her legs, but her heavy work boots just bumped against his dark denim jeans. The midnight blue silk dress bunched around her knees. "I can walk," she whispered to his shoulder. "Put me down." He ignored her demand. The heat radiating off his chest seeped through the thin silk of her dress. He stopped in front of a towering double door made of solid mahogany. He kicked it open with his polished leather boot and carried her inside his master's suite. The room showcased extravagant wealth. A massive, king-sized bed dominated the center of the space, covered in dark velvet blankets. A stone balcony overlooked the glittering city lights below. Garrison walked past the heavy wooden furniture and set her down on the edge of the mattress. Anita bounced once on the soft velvet. She smoothed down the skirt of her midnight blue dress. The thick stack of $100 bills crinkled inside her right pocket. She checked her boot. The solid silver letter opener remained secure against her ankle. Garrison stepped back, rolling his broad shoulders. He cracked his neck, the sound sharp and loud in the quiet room. He unbuttoned the cuffs of his crisp black shirt, the fabric completely untouched by the earlier brawl. He looked down at her. His dark eyes locked onto her face. "You threw a bucket at my beta," Garrison stated. His low voice lacked any trace of anger. "He pulled a knife," Anita whispered. She chewed the inside of her cheek. "You were going to get stabbed. I distracted him." "I saw the blade." Garrison took a step closer. The air in the room grew suffocatingly warm. "I would have dodged." "You are welcome," she whispered, crossing her arms over her chest. Garrison did not smile, but a strange, predatory softness settled over his rigid features. He stepped right between her knees. His tall frame towered over her seated figure. The solid gold signet ring on his right hand caught the dim light of the bedside lamp. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of her messy brown braid behind her ear. His fingers felt like hot iron against her cool skin. "He stands way too close," she whispered out loud, her breath hitching in her throat. Garrison heard her. He tilted his head, leaning down. His face hovered inches from hers. She smelled crushed pine needles and rain, a scent so heavy and distinct it made her head spin. She stared at his sharp jawline, her heart hammered against her ribs, loud enough for his sharp wolf hearing to catch every single beat. "You are fearless," Garrison murmured. His gaze dropped to her lips. "And you belong to me." He leaned in. The intense heat of his skin surrounded her. Anita closed her eyes. She felt the ghost of his breath against her mouth. The tension pulled tight, heavy and undeniable. A massive explosion ripped through the air. The shockwave hit the penthouse like a freight train. The impact knocked Anita backward onto the velvet blankets. The towering floor-to-ceiling windows shattered inward. Thousands of glass shards rained down onto the hardwood floor, glittering like deadly diamonds. The entire building shook violently, swaying under the sheer force of the blast. Garrison spun around. His dark eyes vanished, instantly replaced by glowing amber rings. A guttural roar tore from his chest. "Stay down," Garrison commanded. Thick black smoke billowed through the shattered balcony doors. The smell of burning chemicals and scorched concrete filled the master suite. Alarms shrieked from the hallway, their high-pitched wails cutting through the ringing in Anita's ears. Anita scrambled off the mattress. She dropped to her hands and knees, crawling over the broken glass. Her heavy work boots protected her feet, but her hands scraped against the sharp fragments. "They found us," she whispered, coughing as the acrid smoke burned her lungs. "The rival pack found us." Garrison marched toward the bedroom door. He did not grab a weapon. He cracked his knuckles, the popping sound barely audible over the blaring alarms. The muscles in his broad back tensed, ready for brutal violence. He ripped the door open and charged out into the smoke-filled hallway to protect his home. Anita stayed close to the floor. She needed to move. She reached into her boot, her fingers wrapping around the cold handle of the solid silver letter opener. She pulled the blade free, gripping it tight in her fist. Chapter 12. Thick black smoke choked the hallway. The high-pitched shriek of the fire alarms pierced Anita's eardrums. She crawled out of the master suite, coughing hard. She clutched the solid silver letter opener in her right hand, the metal cold and heavy against her palm. Her midnight blue dress dragged across the debris-covered floorboards. "I need to get out of here," she whispered, wiping stinging tears from her eyes. Up ahead, Garrison stood in the center of the grand foyer. The air around him warped from his intense body heat. He faced the main entrance. A deafening crash echoed through the smoke. An enemy wolf stood on the outer landing. The massive intruder raised his heavy boot and kicked the thick front oak door with monstrous strength. The heavy iron hinges shattered, metal twisted and snapped. The solid oak door broke free from the frame and crashed onto the marble floor, splitting down the middle. 3 rival wolves charged through the broken doorway. They shifted mid-stride, their human skin tearing away to reveal hulking, fur-covered beasts. They bared their razor-sharp teeth, roaring a challenge that shook the remaining glass in the window frames. Garrison did not hesitate. He roared back, his alpha command hitting the air with physical force. He charged the pack of monsters, his fists raised, meeting them head-on in a brutal clash of raw power. Anita scrambled to her feet. She could not fight giant beasts with a letter opener. She needed the emergency stairwell. She turned toward the hallway leading to the exit doors. A tiny, pathetic whimper cut through the chaos. Anita stopped. She spun around. Minx, the sweet beagle, cowered beneath a shattered console table near the broken front door. The dog trembled violently, her floppy ears pressed flat against her head, surrounded by broken wood and falling debris. "Oh, come on," Anita whispered. She shoved the silver letter opener back into her heavy work boot, making sure the blade sat flat against her ankle. She ran straight toward the fight. Garrison grabbed a rogue wolf by the throat, slamming the beast against the brick wall. Anita dodged a swinging claw, ducked under the splintered oak door, and slid across the marble floor on her knees. She reached the console table and scooped Minx into her arms. The beagle buried her wet nose into the silk fabric of Anita's midnight blue dress, shaking like a leaf. "I have you," Anita whispered, clutching the dog tight against her chest. She pushed herself up from the floor. One of the rival wolves spotted her. The beast abandoned its attack on Garrison and turned its glowing yellow eyes toward Anita. It dropped to all fours, its claws gouging the marble tiles, preparing to pounce. Anita did not wait. She spun on her heavy work boots and sprinted down the hallway. She hit the metal door of the emergency stairwell with her shoulder. She shoved it open and threw herself onto the concrete landing. The heavy door slammed shut behind her, cutting off the sounds of the brutal fight. The stairwell sat in pitch-black darkness. The emergency lights flickered, casting a weak, dying glow across the concrete steps. The air felt cold and damp, free from the suffocating smoke of the penthouse. "We just have to keep moving," Anita whispered to the dog. Minx licked her chin. Anita started down the stairs. Her heavy boots clanked against the concrete. She kept one hand wrapped securely around the beagle and used her other hand to grip the metal railing. The thick envelope of cash bumped against her thigh from inside the dress pocket. She descended 3 flights of stairs in the dark. The silence stretched, tight and unnerving. She reached the 4th landing and paused to catch her breath. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the shadows directly below her. Anita froze. She peered over the metal railing into the darkness. A massive silhouette blocked the next flight of stairs. Yellow eyes ignited in the pitch-black space, burning with unhinged malice. The stench of wet fur and rotting meat drifted up the concrete shaft. A rival wolf had cut off her escape route. It took a step up, its thick claws clicking against the hard stone. It bared its teeth, blocking the only way out. Chapter 13. The emergency stairwell felt like a concrete tomb. The heavy metal door above had slammed shut, trapping Anita in the dark shaft. The dying emergency lights cast a sickly, flickering glow over the gray steps. The air turned freezing cold, a sharp contrast to the blistering heat of the penthouse above. A towering silhouette blocked the 3rd-floor landing below. The rival wolf took a step up. Thick claws clicked against the hard stone. Bright yellow eyes ignited in the shadows, burning with unhinged malice. The stench of wet fur, rotting meat, and copper drifted up the shaft, turning Anita's stomach. The beast bared its teeth, letting out a low, vibrating growl that rattled the metal railing. "Stay behind me," Anita whispered. She set Minx on the cold floor. The sweet beagle whimpered, pressing her small body against Anita's heavy work boots. The wolf snapped its jaws, white foam dripping from its chin. It took another step. The muscles beneath its matted gray fur coiled tight, preparing to leap. It viewed her as easy prey, a fragile girl in a torn silk dress. Anita did not freeze. The sassy, defiant streak inside her flared to life. She reached down, her fingers brushing the hem of her midnight blue dress. She slipped her hand inside her heavy work boot. The cold metal handle of the solid silver letter opener weighted right against her ankle. She pulled the weapon free, gripping the intricate vines carved into the hilt. The rogue wolf roared, a deafening sound that bounced off the concrete walls. It launched itself up the stairs. The beast sailed through the air, claws extended, aiming straight for her chest. Anita dropped to one knee. She braced her heavy work boots against the step. She gripped the silver blade with both hands and thrust it upward with every ounce of strength she possessed. The wolf crashed into her. The impact hit like a speeding truck, knocking the breath from her lungs. The solid silver letter opener drove deep into the center of the beast's chest. The reaction proved instantaneous and violent. The pure silver acted like battery acid. The metal burned through the thick fur and muscle. A loud, horrific hiss echoed in the stairwell. Plumes of white smoke poured from the wound. The wolf shrieked in agony. It thrashed, wild and desperate, trying to pull away from the burning poison. A stray claw swung through the dark. The sharp keratin caught Anita's left arm. The claw ripped through the silk sleeve of her midnight blue dress and sliced deep into her flesh. Pain flared hot and sharp. Anita cried out, her grip slipping from the silver hilt. The rogue wolf tumbled backward. It rolled down the steep concrete flight, its heavy body slamming against the edges of the steps. It hit the lower landing with a sickening crunch. The beast twitched once, thick smoke still rising from the silver blade embedded in its chest, and then went completely still. Anita slumped against the cold cinder block wall. She clutched her left arm. Warm blood soaked through the ruined silk, dripping down her fingers and splattering onto the concrete floor. Minx trotted forward, her floppy ears lowered. The beagle licked the blood from Anita's knuckles, letting out a soft, sad whine. "I got him," Anita whispered, her chest heaving as she stared at the dead monster below. "I actually got him." The heavy metal door at the top of the stairwell screeched open. Garrison stood on the landing. The dim emergency lights caught the sharp, rigid lines of his face. His jet-black suit jacket was gone, and his crisp, black button-down shirt hung in tatters. Scratches marred his thick forearms, though the flesh already knit back together under the dim light. His dark eyes swept the stairwell. He saw the dead wolf smoking on the lower landing. Then, his gaze snapped to Anita. He saw the ruined, midnight blue dress. He saw the crimson blood pooling on the gray concrete beneath her boots. Bright, glowing amber rings flared to life in his eyes. A raw, guttural growl tore from his throat, shaking the entire concrete shaft. Garrison cleared the flight of stairs in 2 bounds. He dropped to his knees beside her. The intense heat radiating from his broad chest pushed the chill out of the air. He did not look at the dead wolf again, his glowing eyes locked onto her bleeding arm. He reached out, his hot fingers hovering just inches above her torn skin. Chapter 14. Garrison scooped Anita into his arms. He lifted her off the cold concrete stairs with zero effort. Minx trotted right behind them, her claws clicking against the stone. Garrison carried Anita back up to the 4th floor and kicked the heavy metal door open with his polished leather boot. The grand foyer looked like a war zone. The solid oak double doors lay splintered in half on the floor. Chunks of white marble scattered across the rugs. The bodies of the rival wolves rested motionless against the walls. Garrison ignored the carnage. He carried Anita past the destruction, heading straight for the intact guest bathroom near the end of the hallway. He kicked the bathroom door open and walked inside. The space featured gleaming white subway tiles and a wide, smooth granite counter. He set Anita down on the cool stone. "Stay," Garrison commanded. His voice rumbled low, thick with an edge of lingering panic. He pulled open a mirrored cabinet and retrieved a heavy plastic first aid kit. He dropped it onto the counter next to her hip. He popped the latches and pulled out gauze, a bottle of clear antiseptic, and medical tape. Anita looked down at her left arm. The rogue wolf's claw had sliced a clean, deep line from her shoulder to her elbow. The midnight blue silk hung in bloody ribbons. Her skin throbbed with a dull, burning ache. The thick envelope of cash felt heavy inside the right pocket of her dress. a sharp reminder of her reality. Garrison stepped between her knees. He towered over her seated figure. The intense heat of his skin warmed the chilly bathroom tiles. The glowing amber rings in his eyes faded, replaced by his usual dark, piercing stare. He gripped her wrist with gentle, unyielding strength. He poured the clear antiseptic onto a square of white cotton. "This will bite," he stated. He pressed the wet cotton against her open wound. Anita flinched, biting down hard on the inside of her cheek. She refused to make a sound, but the chemical sting brought fresh tears to her eyes. Garrison worked with surprising grace. His large, scarred hands wiped away the blood, cleaning the torn flesh with practiced efficiency. He picked up a roll of pristine white gauze and began wrapping her arm. His knuckles brushed against her skin. He felt like a walking space heater, the warmth seeping deep into her bruised muscles. "I'm never going to clear my debt," Anita whispered out loud. She stared at the bloody silk hanging from her shoulder. "Medical bills on top of back rent. I ruin everything I wear." Garrison stopped wrapping. He tied the end of the white gauze into a tight, secure knot. He kept his large hands resting on her thighs, his thumbs tracing circles against the silk fabric. He tilted his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You protected my home," Garrison rumbled, the heavy vibration of his voice echoing off the bathroom tiles. "You threw a bucket at my beta to save my life. You faced a rogue beast in the dark to protect my dog." "I needed the cash," she whispered, looking away from his intense stare. Garrison reached up. He placed 2 hot fingers under her chin and gently forced her to look at him. "You have courage," he said, his tone leaving zero room for argument. "My pack owes you a profound debt. I owe you." He stepped closer. The solid gold signet ring on his right hand brushed against her collarbone. "Stay with me," Garrison demanded. "Give me a trial run. Let me prove this pack is your true home. You do this, and I wipe your slate clean. I handle your landlord. I erase your debts. You never scrub another blood-stained floor for pocket change again." Anita chewed her lip. The offer felt heavy. She stared at the man standing between her knees. He looked terrifying, his black shirt in ruins, standing in a destroyed penthouse. Yet his touch remained gentle against her bruised skin. "A trial run," she whispered, testing the words. "A trial run," he confirmed. His sharp jawline softened. "You belong here." Anita looked at the white bandages wrapping her arm. She felt the thick envelope of cash pressing against her thigh from inside her dress pocket. She had no safe apartment to return to. The rival wolves knew her face. "Fine," she whispered. "1 week. We try it your way." Chapter 15. Morning sunlight washed over the quiet city park. Tall oak trees cast long, cooling shadows across the green grass. Anita Parker walked along the paved concrete path, holding a red nylon leash in her right hand. Minx, the sweet beagle, trotted ahead, her floppy ears bouncing with every step as she sniffed the damp dirt. Anita wore her faded blue work coveralls. Garrison's staff had washed the denim overnight, scrubbing out the dirt and sweat. Her heavy work boots crunched against fallen twigs. A fresh, clean white bandage wrapped tightly around her left arm, hiding the deep claw marks. The thick envelope of $100 bills sat secure inside her deep side pocket. She needed a walk. The ruined penthouse felt suffocating. Carpenters hammered wood all morning, replacing the shattered oak double doors and the blown-out balcony windows. Garrison spent the dawn tracking the rival wolves who survived the night raid. "Just a quiet morning," Anita whispered to the wind. "No monsters, no explosions, just a walk." Minx let out a sharp, happy bark and chased a squirrel toward a rusted iron bench near the street curb. Anita followed the dog toward the edge of the park. The city streets sat empty, the morning traffic light and sparse. A rusted black cargo van turned the corner. The tires screeched against the asphalt. The heavy vehicle jumped the curb, its front bumper smashing into a wooden trash can right in front of the park entrance. Anita froze. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She tightened her grip on the red nylon leash. The side door of the dark van slid open with a harsh metal clatter. 3 men stepped out onto the sidewalk. They wore cheap, wrinkled suits. They moved with a predatory, synchronized grace. The wind shifted, carrying their scent. They smelled of wet dog, stale beer, and rot. Rival wolves in human form. Anita did not wait. She dropped the red nylon leash. "Run, Minx!" she shouted. The beagle barked, ducking under the iron bench and scrambling back toward the safety of the deep park trees. Anita spun on her heavy work boots and sprinted in the opposite direction. She pumped her arms, ignoring the dull, burning ache in her bandaged left bicep. She cursed herself for leaving the solid silver letter opener buried in the dead rogue's chest back in the stairwell. She had 0 weapons. She never got the chance to fight back. The 3 men cleared the distance with terrifying, unnatural speed. One of the wolves lunged forward, grabbing Anita by her injured left arm. Pain flared bright and hot. Anita cried out, her knees buckling. She kicked out wildly with her heavy work boot, the thick rubber sole connecting hard with the man's shin. The bone cracked under the impact. The man grunted, but his iron grip did not loosen. "Hold her down," a second man growled, his voice thick and guttural. The third man pulled a rough, dusty burlap sack from his cheap suit jacket. He stepped behind Anita and yanked the heavy fabric down over her head. Total darkness consumed her. The coarse burlap scratched her cheeks. Dust choked her lungs, making her cough violently. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders and legs. They lifted her off the pavement with 0 effort. Anita kicked and thrashed, twisting her body to break free. The envelope of cash bumped against her hip. "Throw her in the back," the first man ordered. They tossed her forward. She hit the ribbed metal floor of the cargo van hard. The impact knocked the wind out of her chest. The metal doors slammed shut behind her, plunging the space into echoing silence. The engine roared to life. The tires squealed against the asphalt as the van peeled away from the curb. Thrown against the side wall, Anita pulled her knees to her chest. She lay in the pitch-black metal box, the heavy burlap sack still covering her head. "A trial run," she whispered into the dusty fabric, her voice shaking. "I survive one night, and I get kidnapped before lunch." The van took a sharp turn, throwing her against the cold floor. She braced her heavy work boots against the metal wall, waiting for the ride to end. Chapter 16. The van hit a brutal pothole, jarring Anita's spine. The brakes screeched. The heavy vehicle jerked to a complete stop. The back doors swung open with a loud metal clang. Rough hands grabbed Anita by her faded blue coveralls. They dragged her out of the cargo bed. Her heavy work boots hit solid ground. She stumbled, blinded by the coarse burlap sack over her head. "Keep moving," a gruff voice commanded. A hand shoved her between the shoulder blades. She marched forward. The air shifted, growing damp and cold. The stench of mildew, stale beer, and deep rot filled her nose. They pushed her through a squeaking wooden door. Her boots transitioned from gravel to a sticky, stained carpet. They forced her down into a hard wooden chair. Thick, scratchy rope wrapped around her wrists, binding her arms tight to the wooden armrests. She winced as the rough fibers rubbed against the white bandages on her left arm. The heavy door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Footsteps retreated, leaving her alone in the room. "They're going to kill me," Anita whispered out loud. She tugged at the thick ropes, but the knots held firm. "They found out I stabbed their guy in the stairwell. This is the end. I'm going to get eaten." A heavy silence stretched. The thick envelope of cash pressed against her thigh, useless in the dark. She possessed no weapons, leaving her completely at the mercy of the rival pack. A new set of footsteps approached. These steps sounded different, heavy, frantic, and pacing. The doorknob rattled. The wooden door groaned open. A hand grabbed the rough burlap at her neck and yanked the sack off her head. Anita blinked against harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights. She sat in the center of a colossal, ruined room. Peeling floral wallpaper hung in sad strips from the walls. The stained carpet squished under her heavy work boots. Broken furniture sat piled in the corners. The place looked like a decayed, abandoned mansion. A man stood in front of her. He did not look like a terrifying mob boss. He looked exhausted. Dark, bruised circles hung under his wild brown eyes. His rumpled gray suit jacket featured a coffee stain on the lapel. His tie hung loose around his neck. This was Gideon, the rival alpha. He did not hold a bloody hunting knife. He did not hold a silver gun. Gideon held a dirty, tangled string mop in his right hand. A cracked, cheap plastic bucket dangled from his left. Anita stared at the mop. She stared at the bucket. She chewed the inside of her cheek, utterly confused. Gideon dropped the cracked plastic bucket onto the stained carpet. Sludgy gray water splashed over the brim, soaking into the ruined floor. He leaned on the wooden handle of the string mop, letting out a long, desperate sigh. "You have no idea how hard it is to find good help in this city," Gideon groaned, rubbing his temples. "What?" Anita whispered. Gideon pointed the wooden mop handle at her faded blue coveralls. "My scouts watched you scrub that dockside warehouse floor yesterday. You worked miracles on that bloodstain. Pure miracles." "You kidnapped me," Anita stated, pulling against the ropes binding her wrists. "You threw a sack over my head and dragged me to a haunted house." "I am under extreme pressure," Gideon pleaded, his voice cracking. He gestured wildly around the ruined, filthy room. "My mother visits tonight. She is the former Luna. If she sees this dining room in this horrific state, she will strip my alpha title and exile me to the woods. She hates dust." Anita stopped pulling at her ropes. She stared at the stressed, disheveled werewolf boss. The sheer absurdity of the situation hit her like a punch to the gut. "You want me to clean your house?" she whispered. "I beg you," Gideon said. He dropped the string mop. He pulled a thick folding knife from his pocket and stepped forward. He sliced the ropes binding her wrists. Anita rubbed her sore arms, careful not to disturb the bandages. Gideon reached into his rumpled gray suit jacket. He pulled out a massive wad of crumpled $50 bills and tossed the money onto her lap. "Name your price," the rival alpha begged, looking at her with wide, desperate eyes. "Please, just fix my floors before my mother arrives." Chapter 17. Garrison stared at the empty concrete sidewalk near the park entrance. A red nylon leash lay abandoned on the ground next to a shattered wooden trash can. He cracked his knuckles. A guttural growl vibrated deep in his chest. A rustle sounded near an iron bench. Minx poked her head out from the bushes, her tail tucked between her legs. Garrison knelt. The beagle ran to him, letting out a pitiful whine. He checked the dog for injuries. Finding none, he scooped the beagle up and placed her inside the passenger seat of his matte navy blue Audi coupe. He closed his eyes. He drew a breath through his nose. The city air carried the stench of wet dog, stale beer, and rot. Rival wolves. Underneath that foul stench lingered a faint, familiar trace of wild blackberry and sweetgrass. His inner beast clawed at his mind, demanding blood. He slipped behind the steering wheel and slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The powerful engine roared. He sped through the city streets, following the scent trail. The invisible path led to a decaying neighborhood on the outskirts of town. He parked the Audi outside a towering wrought iron gate. The metal bars blocked a crumbling, weed-choked driveway. The gate stood locked tight with a heavy steel chain. Garrison did not bother looking for a key. He marched up to the barrier and gripped the iron bars with both hands. His muscles bunched. He ripped the heavy gate right off its hinges. The metal screeched, tearing free from the stone pillars. He tossed the ruined barrier onto the overgrown lawn. It hit the dirt with a loud crash. He stalked up the cracked asphalt driveway. The house loomed ahead, a colossal, decaying mansion with boarded-up windows and a sagging roof. He expected the worst. He prepared for brutal violence. He pictured Anita tied to a chair, bleeding from her injuries. He reached the front porch and kicked the front door. The wood splintered and caved inward, crashing into the dusty foyer. Garrison stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under his polished leather boots. The stench of rot grew stronger, but the trace of wild blackberry and sweetgrass remained steady. He followed her voice down a dark, moldy corridor. "This is dollar store dish detergent," Anita said. Her voice echoed off the peeling wallpaper. "You expect me to lift a stubborn grime stain out of antique hardwood using cheap dish soap?" Garrison stopped in the doorway. Anita stood in the center of a ruined dining room. She wore her washed coveralls, the fresh white bandage stark against her left arm. She held a dirty string mop in her right hand, gesturing with the wooden handle. The wad of crumpled $50 bills sat stuffed in her side pocket. Gideon stood near a broken chair. The rival Alpha looked exhausted. Dark circles hung under his wild brown eyes. He rubbed his temples, staring at a cracked plastic bucket filled with sludgy gray water. He wore a rumpled gray suit jacket sporting a prominent coffee stain on the lapel. "It was on sale," Gideon muttered. "Just use it. My mother arrives in 2 hours. She hates dust." "And the mop is shedding," Anita added, kicking the wet string mop. "Half the cotton is stuck to the wood splinters. If you want this room presentable, I need proper tools. I need industrial wax." "I do not have wax," Gideon groaned. "I have cash." "Then pay up for the inconvenience," Anita whispered out loud, crossing her arms. "Hazard pay, kidnapping tax." Gideon sighed. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out another stack of bills. Garrison blinked. The sheer absurdity of the scene washed over him, halting his blind rage. He stepped into the room. The floorboards creaked under his weight. Gideon spun around. The rival boss reached for the thick folding knife hidden in his suit jacket. Garrison bared his teeth. A vicious snarl ripped through his throat, shaking the peeling wallpaper. The intense heat radiating from his chest warmed the damp room. Anita turned around. She dropped the string mop. It hit the carpet with a wet thud. Chapter 18. Gideon froze, his hand hovering over the pocket containing his folding knife. The rival Alpha stared at the towering man standing in the doorway. Garrison's black button-down shirt hung in tatters, exposing his scarred chest. The solid gold signet ring on his right hand caught the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights. "Do not move," Garrison commanded. His voice vibrated with knee-buckling authority. The sound hit the room like a physical blow. Gideon dropped his hands to his sides. He took a step back, his heavy boots squishing against the wet, stained carpet. He recognized the sheer, unbridled power radiating from the intruding Alpha. Garrison kept his dark eyes locked on the rival boss. He walked into the center of the ruined dining room. He stopped next to Anita. His gaze dropped to the clean white bandages wrapping her left arm. The sight of her injury fueled the burning rage in his chest, but the smell of dish soap and wet cotton confused his inner beast. He looked at the wad of cash in Gideon's hand. "You kidnapped my mate," Garrison stated, his tone devoid of mercy. "I needed a maid," Gideon pleaded, his voice cracking under the pressure. He pointed a shaking finger at the cracked plastic bucket on the floor. "My scout saw her clean that dockside warehouse. She worked miracles on the bloodstain. My mother visits tonight, and this place is a disaster." Garrison stared at the exhausted man. He hated watching another Alpha offer money to his mate. The transaction insulted his pride. It mocked his ability to provide. "Give me the hazard pay," Anita whispered, breaking the tense silence. She reached out and snatched the extra stack of bills right out of Gideon's trembling hand. She shoved the new cash into her coverall pocket next to the original wad of 50s. "This covers the burlap sack." Garrison bared his teeth. He lunged forward. He grabbed Gideon by the throat with his right hand. He lifted the rival boss off his feet and pinned him against the peeling floral wallpaper. The drywall cracked under the impact. Gideon choked, his hands clawing uselessly at Garrison's iron grip. "She is mine," Garrison roared. The raw power in his voice shook the dust from the ceiling rafters. It felt like a jackhammer against the ribs. "If your men ever approach her again, I will tear this haunted house down to the foundation." Gideon nodded fast, his face turning an ugly shade of purple. He gasped for air, his boots kicking the empty space. "Put him down," Anita whispered to Garrison's broad back. "I have my money. Let's get out of this filthy place." Garrison held the rival Alpha against the wall for 5 more seconds, letting the threat sink deep into the man's bones. He released his grip. Gideon crumpled to the stained carpet, coughing and clutching his bruised throat. Garrison turned away from the pathetic sight. He reached out and grabbed Anita's hand. His skin felt like a hot iron against her cool fingers. "We are leaving," he announced. He pulled her out of the ruined dining room, leading her down the moldy corridor and out the splintered front door. The cool afternoon air hit their faces, a welcome relief from the stench of the decayed mansion. They walked down the cracked asphalt driveway toward the street. The heavy wrought iron gate still lay in the overgrown weeds where Garrison had tossed it. Anita climbed into the passenger seat of the matte navy blue Audi coupe. Minx, the sweet beagle, crawled right into her lap, wagging her floppy tail and licking the dirt from Anita's chin. Garrison slid behind the steering wheel. He put the car in gear and sped away from the curb. "That was insane," Anita whispered out loud, stroking the beagle's soft ears. "He just wanted his floors mopped. He offered me $50 an hour." Garrison gripped the steering wheel tight. His knuckles turned white. "You do not work for him. You do not work for anyone else. Ever." "He paid up front," she whispered, patting her bulging pocket. Garrison let out a low growl, the sound vibrating through the leather seats. He pressed his foot on the gas pedal, eager to return to the safety of his own territory. Chapter 19. The matte navy blue Audi coupe pulled into the secure underground garage of the penthouse building. Garrison parked the vehicle in his designated spot. Anita unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out onto the concrete floor. She carried Minx in her arms, her heavy work boots echoing in the cavernous space. They rode the private glass elevator up to the top floor. The doors parted, revealing a transformed grand foyer. The destruction from the night before was cleared away. The marble floor gleamed, free of dust and blood. A carpenter stood near the entrance. He wore a heavy tool belt and held a power drill. He was installing fresh brass hinges onto a brand-new, towering oak double door. The rich scent of cut wood and sawdust filled the air, masking the lingering smell of the explosion. The carpenter stopped drilling when he saw Anita. He reached into a large plastic bin sitting near his toolbox. He pulled out her red plastic bucket and the yellow scrub brush. "Found these in the dining hall wreckage," the carpenter said, holding them out. "Thank you," Anita said. She took the handle of the red bucket, dropping her yellow brush inside. Garrison walked past them, his face an unreadable mask. He headed straight for his office, needing to coordinate his guards after the morning chaos. Anita walked down the long hallway and entered the guest room. The space looked pristine. The maids had swept up every shard of glass from the shattered balcony windows. A cool breeze blew through the open frame. She set Minx on the floor. She dropped her red bucket near the door. Anita walked over to the plush mattress. She emptied her pockets. She tossed the thick envelope of Garrison's down payment onto the velvet blankets alongside her car keys. She added the heavy wad of crumpled $50 bills from Gideon. She emptied the hazard pay on top of the pile. She sat on the edge of the bed and started counting the paper currency. The crisp hundreds and the wrinkled 50s formed a small mountain of wealth. "This is it," she whispered out loud, her fingers tracing the edges of the bills. "This clears my landlord. This buys the cabin in the woods. I have enough to vanish." She stood up and walked to the spacious closet. She searched the top shelf and found a dark canvas duffel bag. She pulled it down and unzipped the main compartment. She returned to the bed. She scooped up the stacks of cash and stuffed them into the bottom of the duffel bag. She grabbed a spare pair of thick socks from the closet, tossed them in with her car keys, and planned her escape. The rival wolves knew her face. Garrison possessed a terrifying amount of power. The underground city streets held too many monsters. She needed a quiet life, far away from the blood and the shifting beasts. She zipped the canvas bag shut. Minx trotted into the guest room. The sweet beagle jumped onto the plush mattress. She curled into a tight ball, resting her chin right on top of the dark canvas duffel bag. She let out a soft, sad whine. "Move, Minx," Anita whispered, nudging the dog's side. The beagle refused to budge. She dug her claws into the canvas fabric, staring up at Anita with wide, pleading brown eyes. "I cannot stay here," Anita whispered, chewing the inside of her cheek. "I am just a cleaner. I do not belong in a glass cage." She reached under the dog, grabbed the heavy strap of the duffel bag, and pulled it free. Minx barked in protest, jumping off the bed to nip at Anita's heavy work boots. Anita picked up her red plastic bucket with her free hand. She walked out of the guest room, leaving the sweet beagle whining on the velvet blankets. She walked down the hallway, keeping her footsteps light. The carpenter was still drilling the new brass hinges into the oak frame, the loud noise covering her exit. She slipped past the grand foyer and stepped into the glass elevator. She pressed the button for the underground garage. The doors slid shut, sealing her in silence. She watched the city skyline drop away as the elevator descended, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She gripped the canvas strap tight, ready to reclaim her freedom. Chapter 20. The glass elevator doors opened, revealing the quiet expanse of the underground parking garage. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across the concrete pillars. Anita stepped out, gripping the dark canvas duffel bag and her red plastic bucket. She walked down the rows of expensive luxury vehicles until she spotted her dented silver 2008 Chevy hatchback. It looked ridiculous parked next to Garrison's matte navy blue Audi coupe, a symbol of her old life waiting to take her away. She pulled her car keys from her pocket. She unlocked the driver's side door with a sharp click. She tossed the heavy duffel bag and the red bucket onto the passenger seat. She slid behind the steering wheel and slammed the door shut. "Just drive," she whispered to the dashboard. "Just put the car in gear and drive away." She shoved the key into the ignition and turned it. The old engine sputtered, coughing twice before roaring to life. She gripped the worn steering wheel, shifting the car into drive. A tall shadow stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Garrison walked into the center of the driving lane. He stood right in front of the Chevy's front bumper. He still wore his ruined black button-down shirt, the torn fabric exposing his scarred shoulder. He crossed his thick arms over his chest. He did not flinch. He did not move. He stood like an immovable mountain of muscle and stubborn will. Anita hit the brakes. The car jerked to a halt. She rolled down her window. The cold air of the garage rushed in. "Move out of the way," she whispered out loud, glaring through the windshield. Garrison uncrossed his arms. He walked around the hood of the Chevy, his heavy boots echoing against the concrete. He reached the driver's side window. He leaned down, resting his large hands on the edge of the metal frame. The intense heat from his body flooded the cold interior of the car, washing over her face. His dark eyes locked onto hers, burning with an unspoken intensity. He looked past her braid, scanning the duffel bag and the red bucket sitting on the passenger seat. "You belong here," Garrison stated. His voice lacked the heavy, pushing command of the Alpha. He spoke the words as a simple, undeniable fact. "I belong in the woods," she whispered, her voice shaking. She chewed the inside of her cheek. "I have my cash. I cleared my debt." Garrison reached through the open window. His hot fingers brushed against her cheek, wiping away a smudge of gray dirt left over from the decayed mansion. His touch sent a jolt of raw electricity straight down her spine. "You belong with me," he corrected. He leaned his head and shoulders through the open window frame. He closed the distance between them, eliminating the final inches of space. He kissed her. The contact hit Anita like a lightning strike. The kiss was firm, demanding, and filled with visceral heat. He tasted like power and raw determination. The lingering panic in her chest vanished, replaced by a sudden rush of certainty. The deep, heavy mate bond locked into place, sinking straight into her bones. Anita let go of the steering wheel. She reached up, her fingers tangling in his hair. She kissed him back, matching his intensity. She pulled his ruined black shirt, anchoring herself to the solid, unyielding strength of his broad chest. Garrison broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. He breathed in the scent of wild blackberry and sweet grass. "Stay," he murmured against her lips. Anita opened her eyes. She looked at the steering wheel. She looked at the dark canvas duffel bag holding her escape fund. Finally, she looked into his dark, unwavering eyes. "Fine," she whispered, her sassy streak breaking through the heavy tension. "But you are paying to detail my car. Your dog left paw prints on the seats." Garrison let out a low, vibrating laugh, a sound she had never heard before. It echoed in the quiet garage, rich and genuine. He opened the driver's side door, reaching in to unbuckle her seatbelt. He pulled her out of the dented silver Chevy, lifting her off her heavy work boots. He carried her away from the car, leaving the duffel bag and the cash behind, carrying her back to the glass elevator and the home she could no longer deny. Chapter 21. The glass elevator carried them upward, a silent hum of machinery contrasting with the frantic beating of Anita's heart. Garrison held her tight against his chest. His raw power thrummed against her skin. She rested her head on his ruined black button-down shirt. Her heavy work boots dangled over his thick arm. "You left my life savings in the car," she whispered to his collarbone, chewing the inside of her cheek. "My guards patrol the garage," Garrison rumbled, his voice vibrating against her ear. "Your money remains secure. Tonight is for us." The doors parted with a soft chime. He stepped into the pristine, grand foyer. The new brass hinges on the towering oak double doors gleamed under the crystal chandeliers. He bypassed the guest room, carrying her straight down the long hallway and into his master suite. He set her down on the dark velvet blankets covering the king-sized bed. The city lights flickered through the open stone balcony frame, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. The night wind swept into the room, but the intense heat radiating from his towering frame kept the chill at bay. Garrison reached down. His scarred hands gripped her heavy work boots, unlacing them with care. He pulled them from her feet and tossed them aside. They hit the floorboards with a heavy thud. He traced the line of her jaw, his touch sending a jolt of electricity down her spine. His dark eyes burned with fierce determination. "No more running," he stated. It was a vow. "No more running," she whispered back, matching his gaze. She reached up and grabbed the lapels of his torn black shirt. She pushed the ruined fabric off his broad shoulders, exposing the thick muscles underneath. They crashed back onto the velvet blankets. The physical chemistry ignited, burning hot and fast. The true mate bond snapped into place, a deep, unbreakable connection anchoring their souls together. Garrison's inner beast, wild and demanding for days, settled at last into a low, contented hum. He claimed her with a desperate hunger, his touch firm and possessive. The shadows in the room stretched and warped as the hours passed, leaving no room for doubt or fear. Bright morning sunlight broke through the open balcony frame, signaling a new day. Anita woke up tangled in the dark velvet sheets. Her left arm throbbed with a dull ache under the clean white bandages, a reminder of the rogue wolf in the stairwell. Garrison slept beside her on his stomach, his broad back rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The solid gold signet ring rested on the wooden nightstand near a lamp. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cold floorboards. She grabbed her freshly washed, faded blue coveralls from a nearby chair and pulled them on. She needed her things. The canvas duffel bag stuffed with crisp hundreds and crumpled 50s sat unattended downstairs. Her red plastic bucket and yellow scrub brush waited on the car seat. She picked up her heavy work boots and slipped out the bedroom door. She walked down the long hallway, her steps silent against the plush gray rugs. She found Minx, the sweet beagle, curled up on the leather sofa in the living room. "Stay here, Minx," Anita whispered, giving the floppy ears a quick scratch. She sat on a bench in the grand foyer and laced up her work boots tight. She took the glass elevator down to the underground garage. The cavernous space sat empty and quiet, save for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Her dented silver 2008 Chevy hatchback waited right where she left it, looking out of place parked next to the luxury vehicles. She pulled her keys from her pocket and unlocked the driver's side door. The dark canvas duffel bag and the red plastic bucket rested on the passenger seat. The yellow scrub brush clattered against the plastic bottom as she grabbed the bucket handle. She slung the heavy canvas bag strap over her shoulder, the wealth pressing against her ribs. She locked the Chevy and headed back to the elevator. She felt different today. The crushing panic over back rent and landlord threats was gone. The rival wolves felt like a distant nightmare. She rode the elevator back up to the top floor. She stepped into the penthouse. Her stomach let out a loud rumble, echoing in the quiet foyer. She carried the heavy canvas duffel bag and the red bucket toward the sprawling kitchen, ready to find some food before waking her alpha. Chapter 22. Anita walked into the sprawling kitchen. The polished white marble island gleamed under the morning sun pouring through the tall windows. She dropped the heavy, dark canvas duffel bag onto a leather bar stool. She set her red plastic bucket on the floor near the stainless steel refrigerator. The yellow scrub brush rested inside the plastic container, the harsh bristles facing up. She opened the wide refrigerator doors. She grabbed a carton of eggs, a thick block of cheddar cheese, and a heavy pack of thick-cut bacon. She needed a huge breakfast to feed Garrison's intense metabolism. She set the cold food on the cool marble counter, preparing to cook. A soft scrape sounded against the floorboards near the walk-in pantry. Anita paused. She turned her head, peering around the open fridge door. A tall woman slipped into the kitchen. She wore a tight crimson dress, the silk fabric clinging to her frame. Anita recognized her right away. She was one of the pack members from the chaotic dining hall dinner, the one who glared with pure disgust when Anita entered the room wearing the midnight blue gown. The woman did not notice Anita standing in the shadows. She crept toward the far corner of the room. A metal water bowl and a ceramic food dish sat on a rubber mat next to the wall. Minx's feeding station. The woman reached into the pocket of her crimson dress. She pulled out a small glass vial. She popped the cork stopper. A toxic, bitter stench hit the air, smelling like rotting weeds and burnt ash. Wolfsbane. The woman tilted the glass vial over the ceramic bowl, preparing to pour the lethal poison straight onto the dry dog kibble. "What do you think you are doing?" Anita whispered out loud, slamming the heavy refrigerator door shut with a loud bang. The woman flinched. The glass vial slipped from her trembling fingers. It hit the hard floor tiles and shattered into tiny pieces. Thick purple liquid splattered across the white grout, eating into the ceramic with a harsh, bubbling hiss. The woman spun around, her face twisted in rage. Her human eyes flashed. The dark pupils vanished, replaced by bright, glowing yellow rings. The feral gaze burned with unhinged malice and pure, unadulterated jealousy. "You do not belong in this home," the woman spat. Her voice twisted into a thick, guttural growl that sounded more animal than human. "You are a weak maid. You bring ruin and disrespect to our alpha. I will poison that pathetic mutt, and then I will rip your throat out." "You need professional help," Anita whispered, taking a slow step back. She chewed the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. Her heart hammered a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. The woman did not waste time arguing. She embraced her inner beast. The transformation hit like a violent storm. Human skin tore away, replaced in a flash by coarse, sandy brown fur. Bones snapped and cracked in a sickening symphony, elongating and reshaping into a hulking, terrifying monster. The wolf stood on two thick hind legs, towering near the ceiling fixtures. Razor-sharp claws extended from her thick paws. White foam dripped from her elongated jaws, splashing onto the kitchen tiles. The beast dropped to all fours. The polished marble floor scratched and gouged under her heavy claws. She paced sideways, blocking the main archway leading to the hallway, cutting off Anita's only escape route. Anita backed up. Her heavy work boots bumped against the red plastic bucket sitting on the floor behind her. She cast a frantic gaze at the kitchen counter. The eggs and raw bacon offered zero defense. The dark canvas duffel bag held stacks of paper cash, not weapons. Her solid silver letter opener was gone forever, abandoned in the chest of a dead rogue in the emergency stairwell. She possessed no blades. She had no backup. The sandy brown beast bared its jagged teeth and let out a deafening, wet roar. The monster lunged forward, powerful muscles contracting, heavy jaws snapping straight toward Anita's fragile neck. Anita dropped into a low crouch. She reached her right hand into the red plastic bucket and grabbed the sturdy handle of her yellow scrub brush. Chapter 23. The beast launched itself through the air, jaws wide open. The stench of hot breath and rotting meat washed over Anita. She did not freeze. She gripped the plastic handle of the yellow scrub brush with both hands. She planted her heavy work boots against the kitchen floor tiles and swung the cleaning tool like a baseball bat. The hard plastic back of the brush smashed straight into the beast's snout. The impact cracked loud in the kitchen. The wolf's nose, packed with sensitive nerves, absorbed the full, brutal force of the blow. The monster shrieked in sudden agony. The beast twisted midair, its momentum breaking. It crashed onto the polished white marble island, sliding across the stone surface and knocking the carton of eggs onto the floor. Yellow yolks splattered across the tiles. The wolf scrambled off the island, shaking its large, furry head. Blood dripped from its bruised snout. The yellow eyes locked onto Anita, burning with a tenfold increase in pure, homicidal rage. The creature bared its teeth, preparing for a second, lethal strike. The kitchen archway exploded with movement. Garrison burst into the room. He wore dark denim jeans, his chest bare and scarred. He took one look at the shattered vial of wolfsbane, the splattered eggs, the hulking sandy brown beast, and Anita clutching her yellow scrub brush. Glowing amber rings flared to life in his eyes. The sheer heat radiating from his body turned the kitchen into a furnace. He stepped in front of Anita, shielding her with his broad back. "Submit!" Garrison roared. The Alpha command hit the room with the force of a detonating bomb. The heavy, vibrating power cracked through the air. The sound hit Anita like a sharp kick to the ribs. The air rushed from her lungs. A ringing ache spiked straight through the center of her skull, forcing her to drop to one knee. She clutched the edge of the marble counter for support, gasping for breath. The command devastated the sandy brown beast. The wolf collapsed in a flash, its front legs giving out. The monster hit the floor tiles hard, pressing its bleeding snout against the spilled egg yolks. The beast whined, a pathetic, high-pitched sound of total surrender. It could not fight the overwhelming dominance in the Alpha's voice. Garrison stood over the trembling creature. His chest heaved. He cracked his knuckles, the popping sound echoing in the silent kitchen. "You brought wolfsbane into my home," Garrison rumbled, his voice cold and devoid of mercy. "You targeted my dog. You threatened my mate. You broke the fundamental laws of this pack." The wolf let out another low whine, keeping its eyes fixed on the floor. "Shift back," Garrison commanded. The beast shuddered. The coarse fur receded. Bones cracked and reshaped. Within seconds, the tall woman in the crimson dress knelt on the floor, shivering and bleeding from her bruised nose. She kept her head bowed, unable to look the Alpha in the face. "Take your things," Garrison stated, adjusting the solid gold signet ring on his right hand. "Leave this territory. If I catch your scent within city limits by nightfall, I will end your life. You are banished." The woman scrambled to her feet. She did not argue. She did not look at Anita. She turned and sprinted out of the kitchen, her bare feet slapping against the hardwood hallway. The front door opened and slammed shut seconds later. Garrison turned around. The amber rings in his eyes faded to black. The oppressive heat in the room cooled. He reached down, gripping Anita's uninjured right arm, and pulled her to her feet with care. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his dark eyes scanning her faded blue coveralls. "I am fine," she whispered out loud, her breathing returning to normal. She looked down at her hand. She still held the yellow scrub brush tight in her grip. "I broke her nose with a piece of plastic." Garrison looked at the brush. A low, vibrating laugh rumbled deep in his chest. He reached out and pulled her against him, burying his face in her messy brown braid. "You are terrifying," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "I will hire someone to clean this mess. Come back to bed." "No way," Anita whispered, tapping the yellow brush against his chest. "I have a bucket. I need to earn my keep." Chapter 24. 3 months passed. The harsh winter chills swept through the city streets below, but the towering penthouse remained a fortress of warmth and raw luxury. Anita Parker stood behind a sleek mahogany desk in her private office. She wore tailored black slacks and a crisp white silk blouse, a stark upgrade from her torn, faded blue work coveralls. The clean white bandage on her left arm was long gone, leaving only a thin, silver scar as a souvenir. She reviewed a stack of thick paper contracts. Her new company, Apex Elite Cleaning, handled sensitive, high-paying jobs in the underground city. She no longer scrubbed bloody concrete floors herself. She dispatched crews of professionals to clean up faction messes, demanding towering fees paid in cash up front. The dark canvas duffel bag sat on a high wooden shelf behind her desk. It remained packed with her original escape cash. She kept the bag there as a trophy, a daily reminder of the chaotic night she chose to stay. Minx, the sweet beagle, slept on a plush, round dog bed in the corner of the office. The dog's floppy ears twitched as she chased imaginary rabbits in her deep sleep. Garrison sat in a wide leather armchair near the towering floor-to-ceiling windows. He wore dark denim jeans and a fitted black t-shirt. He reviewed territory maps on a digital tablet. The solid gold signet ring caught the bright afternoon light. The true mate bond between them pulsed steady and strong, providing a constant, comforting presence in her chest. The black landline phone sitting on her mahogany desk rang. The sharp digital trill cut through the quiet room. Anita reached for the plastic receiver, but Garrison moved faster. He stood up, crossed the room in 2 long strides, and picked up the phone. He pressed the speaker button, keeping his dark eyes locked on his mate. "Apex Elite," Garrison rumbled, his voice low, heavy, and demanding. "Ah, Alpha Garrison," a stressed, familiar voice echoed from the plastic speaker. It was Gideon. The rival boss sounded just as exhausted and frantic as the day they met in the decayed mansion. "I need to book a priority appointment with your Luna. My pack held a grand celebration last night. Someone spilled a whole keg of ale on the antique rug in the parlor. My mother visits tomorrow morning. I need her specialized crew right now." Garrison's sharp jawline tightened. The thick muscles in his forearms bunched under his skin. "She does not work for you," Garrison stated, his tone leaving zero room for negotiation. "I will pay triple her usual rate," Gideon pleaded, sheer desperation leaking through the phone line. "I have a thick briefcase of cash sitting right here, please. The stain is setting into the fibers as we speak." Garrison bared his teeth. A low, vibrating growl ripped through his broad chest, sounding straight out of a brutal nightmare. He picked up the heavy plastic receiver in his scarred hands. He gripped both ends of the device and twisted hard. The thick, black plastic snapped in half with a loud, sharp crack. Wires tore loose from the casing. He dropped the broken pieces of the phone into the metal trash can sitting next to the desk. "He is going to leave a terrible review," Anita whispered out loud, crossing her arms over her chest. She chewed the inside of her cheek to hide her growing smile. "Let him," Garrison replied, dusting the plastic shards off his hands. He walked around the mahogany desk. The intense heat radiating from his body warmed the small space between them. "I told him you do not work for other alphas. He needs to learn to use a mop and a bucket himself." Anita looked at the broken phone resting in the trash can. She thought about her old life. She remembered the cold apartment, the constant threats from her landlord, and the endless, crushing debt. She looked at the successful business contracts sitting on her desk. She looked at the tall, powerful man standing in front of her, fierce, protective, and devoted. "Feels like a boulder off my shoulders," she whispered, leaning forward and resting her cheek against his broad chest. Minx woke up from her nap. The beagle trotted over to the desk, wagged her tail, and let out a sharp, happy bark. Garrison wrapped his strong arms around Anita's waist. He lifted her off her feet, his dark eyes shining with pure adoration. He leaned down and captured her lips. The final kiss tasted like victory, cementing her place as the Luna of the city. The end. Quick favor, do not go anywhere yet. If you thought Anita had guts for throwing a jug of bleach at a mafia alpha and bashing his beta with a red bucket, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is pure, unhinged chaos.